Welcome to the Living United in Central Illinois podcast. I'm Mitch Baker, the Community Impact Manager at United Way of Central Illinois, and I want to thank you for joining us for Living United, our regular podcast sharing both the stories of the programs, people, and organizations creating change in our community, along with how you can get involved. Because after all, we are all better when working together. On today's podcast, I'm going to be joined by Katrina Hayes, our Director of Community Impact, and Dominic Watson of Watson Diversity Solutions and the Springfield Black Chamber of Commerce to discuss our recent 21-week equity challenge and what opportunities lie ahead for our community. But before we begin, I want to remind you that you can listen to and subscribe to our audio podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. In addition, you can subscribe to the videocast of Living United in Central Illinois on YouTube. And if you're having trouble searching for our episodes, especially with Living United in Central Illinois being new, just visit our website at springfieldunitedway.org, where we will be posting links to the most up-to-date episodes. Before we start, I want to recognize Shields, both for sponsoring this podcast and for being a pillar of the Springfield community. If you don't already know, Shields is a sporting goods store right here in Springfield on South MacArthur. Be sure to stop in and support a business that helps its community. And now, here's our interview with Dominic Watson.
Well, welcome everyone who is joining us, and we thank you for listening in. One of the things you may not know as you're joining us is that United Way of Central Illinois, we are a member of not only United Way Worldwide, which we have so many benefits, which I'm sure we'll get to as we continue with the podcast series, but another one is that we are actually a member of United Way of Illinois, our statewide association. And through that statewide association, we, are able to combine our efforts and really do some incredible work. Healing Illinois is a racial healing initiative of the Illinois Department of Human Services in partnership with the Chicago Community Trust. And they distributed $4.5 million in grants to local communities all throughout Illinois. And United Way of Illinois was actually very fortunate to receive a grant to help support the 21-week equity challenge, which set out to provide different activities, different learning opportunities through email to anyone who signed up to really dive deep into some critical issues regarding race relations and steps that communities can take, and also history that we need to understand if we want to make our communities a better place to live, work, and raise families. And so today we're joined by Dominic, as we mentioned. And so Dominic, tell us a little bit about you and Watson Diversity Solutions, what brought you into that work?
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, Katrina, Mitch, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure. Given COVID, it's good to be in person with you all. Again, my name is Dominic Watson. I always start off by saying I wear quite a few hats in the community. So I'm a native of Springfield, grown up in Springfield. I'm fortunate enough to be married, a father of 5. Again, I've been able to do great work in my community. I wear several different hats in the community, a few of which are I'm a labor lobbyist for AFSCME, and then also I'm head of the Springfield Black Chamber of Commerce, and we're focused on inspiring, developing, and promoting Black economic success in the greater Springfield community. And actually, a few years ago, I started Watson's Diversity Solutions to kind of further my personal mission of ensuring that Black economic access is met.
Very cool. So I am curious, so as part of this equity challenge, part of what our community did was have community conversations around those. And thank you for leading those. You did a great job. You made me personally, as a participant of those, feel really comfortable and good sharing my thoughts in those. And it was a good time. But can you talk a little bit about what led you to get involved in those equity conversations?
Yeah, so first and foremost, as with anyone who comes from my minority background, our diversity is our life, right? It's our experience on a day-to-day basis. So naturally, when you have a platform to speak out about certain things, you tend to talk about your personal experiences. And again, diversity is my everyday experience, not to be watered down, not to be misconstrued. So what better person to talk about those things or those challenges than someone who's lived them?
Awesome.
Agreed.
And I don't know, Katrina, do you want to talk a little bit about the Healing Illinois grants and some of that extra work that was going on?
Yeah, so we received the big grant for United Way of Illinois, which led us to the 21-week equity challenge. But then we were fortunate enough to receive even additional funds through Healing Illinois through pass-through grant from United Way of Mid-Illinois over in Decatur. And with that money, it allowed us to give out grants locally, and it also allowed us to fund community conversations, because I think that's one of the things that we take for granted. And like you said, Dominic, it's your lived experience is diversity and the trauma of racism. And as we talked about, okay, well, we want a further conversation. Well, you need to pay the talent that is trained and has the capacity to facilitate critical dialogue, because I can do community conversations. And Dominic, you've heard me say this how many times? I can lead community conversations. But when it comes to race-centered diversity and equity and inclusion conversations, I am not a well-trained professional. And so we have to give it over to people who have that work. And so we were very fortunate that the committee of volunteers that helped to distribute those dollars did see our joint proposal to hand it over to Dominic to help lead that work for our community. And then he was joined by a couple of facilitators as well that had unique backgrounds as well.
Yeah. And can I take a moment to like recognize those rock stars?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
So I was so fortunate enough, seeing as this is my first time, really taking a leadership position on DEI work. And again, thank you for the platform. Thank you to United Way of Illinois and United Way of Central Illinois for allowing me to come in and really just share my experiences. Because again, it's easy to talk about your own experience as opposed to drawing and seeing, images or misconceptions, through someone else's lens. So I had two rock star co-facilitators. The first one is someone who's no stranger to the work, Dr. Pamela Woodson. And by doctor, we mean doctor, minister, professor. She wears
I'm not sure what hat she can't wear, right? Or doesn't wear.
Yeah. Dr. Pamela Watson, she was great. Again, comes from has a wealth of background in this line of work. Comes from a great lineage of those professionals who have done this work in the past. And Lisa Miller, so she's great. Hope Church and Be the Bridge, she's done amazing work to actually introduce the DEI conversation in that church. And so they were my rock star co-facilitators, and they actually held me up a lot of times when I had, when things were getting a little too tough to talk about. They came in and reinforced a lot of the things that I was talking about.
I think having the blend of diversity within the facilitators also allowed all different ethnicities coming to the conversations to connect in a different way, because as we were prepping for the conversations and things, you and Pamela also had to be mindful of like which weeks you wanted to, because there were some weeks that it was like driven by passion, like this is something that I absolutely we have to fix, we have to work on, and then other weeks is like, as a person of color, this is tough, like this
Absolutely.
Is tough, this is a tough conversation for us to lead, to facilitate, because we are experiencing, and I think in one of the weeks we really talked about is like that re-traumatization. Is like every time we have these experiences, you're being re-traumatized because of things that you faced in your life.
No, absolutely. I think it was week 5, the impact of racial trauma on Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so, oftentimes, without knowing it, and again, the more that we study EDI, the more we understand that trauma is embedded in racism, right? Mm-hmm. So the more you experience racism, the more that either, there's a couple different ways that you can go about it. You can be desensitized to it, or it could be a trigger for you, and anger and frustration, sadness, all those things come about, all those feelings come about through those triggered racial, conversations or just racial experiences, right? And so given the past, and again, let's just focus on this past year, right? With George Floyd and topple that with COVID, being at home, some individuals were isolated. There was a lot of probably, internal resurfacing of trauma over this past year. And this provided a platform for individuals who wanted to talk more about those trauma-driven experiences, enabled them a platform where they could come together with individuals who could, resonate, who that journey would resonate with, and how we could overcome by using this community platform. And again, oftentimes we are so comfortable in our own individual silos. We're doing great work, but our great work may not be reaching all those who could benefit from that. And what I liked about this particular program, this particular opportunity, enabled us all to come together utilizing one platform to just talk about and have a candid conversation about race.
Yeah.
No.
Well, you go.
No, I absolutely. And I was just going to ask, so you really are coming to this from sort of the expert perspective.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, getting into the actual content of that 21-week equity challenge, was there anything that was new even to you? Or was there anything that you read and you thought, man, if we could just get everyone on earth to know this fact, we would be in a better spot?
Yeah, so I think that trauma lens, looking at things from that trauma lens, really, really resonated with me, because I take pride in letting things slide off of me. Kind of my background, I grew up in Springfield, and Springfield is pretty consistently it's kind of divided, to put it frankly. It's divided. And so, you have not only the race divide, based on what side of town you live on, but you have the classes, system divide, where the haves and the have-nots. And so I was fortunate enough to grow up in a middle-class household. It wasn't always like that, but my mom fought to establish her own business and to thrive. And so she moved us out of the east side of town over to the north side of town, right? Mm-hmm. North side had her home built from scratch. So I went to all black Catholic school from 5th through 8th, in the middle of the east side, or the heart of the east side. And then in high school from 9th through 12th, I went to all white Catholic school over on the north side of town. Mm-hmm. So went from St. Patrick's, again, inner city Catholic school, to Ursuline Academy, which is north side, predominantly white school. And so I experienced both worlds. And, I got my sense of identity and culture from my household and also from St. Pat's, right? And then I got my sense of learning how to work with all walks of life from Ursuline Academy. And so oftentimes I pride myself in letting things slide off of me, right? Because I have a strong sense of identity and who I am. So why should I let someone else control me through my emotions, right? So, and
not everybody has that. Because I think you are so blessed from conversations. Like, am I allowed to share this? So your mother, Black Panther, definitely believes in the black community, the black spirit, and just reinforcing that in everything that you do. Mm-hmm. Not everyone has that.
Absolutely, and she instilled in me the importance of sense of self, right? Mm-hmm. So embracing, yes, you wear all these different hats in the community, but you embrace the fact that you're a black male in the community, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm driven by the experiences that I have as a black male, right? And that's what has led me to do all the work that I'm doing, whether it's in the EDI space or outside of that, community work, political work, whatever, at that particular time. And so to jump back, the trauma, oftentimes, that trauma plays out in things that are not driven by racism. So sure. I might be, I might have a racial episode where someone treated me a certain way based on my skin color, and I internalized that, right, and just let it fester, and now easily triggered by something else, right? Sure. The sky is blue, someone told me it's green. Now I'm how could you say? No, it's not. So I had one of these moments. If I could speak candidly, I had one of these moments. If you look at a year ago, when George Floyd, where that had took place, there was a moment where I still to this day cannot watch the video. Right, it's too much. Right, because I've seen that time and time again. Right, so there was a moment in time where I was planning 217 Black Restaurant Weekend. And it was the inaugural weekend, and I just remember a moment where I was headed to the kickoff event. And it was, I had been busy 10 days going, doing everything you could think of for this event. And I just had a breakdown of something that I think it was, it was probably arguably, it's funny that it was probably something my mom said. And I felt like a baby. I just had a breakdown, but it wasn't because of what my mom said, right? It was because of all the things, from George Floyd to the marches, because I participated in those, and then the stress of planning 217 Black Restaurant Weekend, and I'm 37, at the time 36-year-old grown man, and I kind of broke down for a minute, I had one of those, ugly face cries, things like that. And just to be candid, it wasn't because of what my mom said. It was more so because of everything that was going on, right?
So much.
Yeah. It was like, you continue to boil a pot of water, it's going to overflow at some point, right? Or at least the top is going to fly off, right? So, so the trauma, right? The trauma portion, I think it was, again, week 5, really, really got me. Really, really got me. So.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, I think one of the things, and I don't know why, it didn't really, it sounds awful. I'm going to just show my ignorance, because we do ACEs work, right? Adverse Childhood Experiences, and we lead this work. We try to create a collaborative that talks, from the school to our funded programs in order to create like a really good system of care. Right. So that way volunteers interacting with children are not re-traumatizing them, or, approaching them in resilience-based supports, and really just helping to stabilize them if that is not their experience at home for a variety of reasons. Right. And so then when we came to week 5, and I'm reading all of this stuff about adverse childhood experiences, I'm like, well, I know this, right? But then the layer of racism put on top of it, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, it just, and I think that they're still working on the empirical data and evidence to support it, because that's what they started to talk about, is like, it's hard to quantify, right? But it's the power of words, it's the environments that you're being put in, it's the things you're seeing by a lot, you know what I mean? And it was just, it was a shock and awe moment for me, because I'm like, here we are talking about ACEs work and doing everything to support adverse and overcome adverse childhood experiences, and yet racism underpins all of that.
Absolutely.
And that was I was like, what? Like, I don't know. Like, did you have any moment where you're like, we're doing this, we know this, but like, what?
Right. No, totally. And hearing both of you sort of talk about these like really personal experiences, it reminds me, I feel like in these equity challenge conversations, one of my favorite parts was listening to people talk about their own experiences. And Dominic, I'm curious, did you have any moments in those equity conversations that stuck out to you as memorable?
As moments where, yes, there were, to put it frankly, and again, can we talk about the entire series as being one? Absolutely. I mean, there were so many different elements where, again, I like to tip my hat to my co-facilitators, because they were amazing, and I mean, they really, really pulled, I would say, out of me, and hopefully it was mutual. But those, iron, iron sharpened iron. So there were moments where I didn't feel like I could dig deep enough, and then hearing them be candid about their experiences, whether it's from a white woman's standpoint or a black woman's standpoint, or just an individual who's working in the EDI space. They were able to draw on their experiences, which made me want to talk more about my experiences. Because oftentimes, again, I hate to go back to personal experiences, but oftentimes we're taught to have this outer shell that's hard and let everything just kind of bounce off that shell. And oftentimes we don't have a space where we can be candid and just, if we need to have a moment and to just, purge ourselves of trauma or memories, but this was the space to do so.
So Dominic aligned community experts to join us at these community conversations to talk about programs that they're doing, to talk about their expertise, again, to highlight, you know, programs and people and institutions that are lifting up individuals of color and the individual BIPOC voice. And so Shannon DeWitt McCormick joined us that evening, and she posed a question, and it has just stuck with me because I literally think about it all the time now. Is when was your first time you had a supervisor or teacher or educator, someone you had to look to as for authority in your life that was a person of color?
Right.
And I never have. Until, you know, I always joked, I told Mitch this earlier, I was like, Dominic was my boss during the 21-week equity challenge. But, I mean, aside from that, unless I'm, you know, seeking out information from board members or whatever, I've never had a direct supervisor, teacher, or anything in my life. And how many more Americans exist in the world that share that experience?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I know I'm one who shared that experience until college when I, you know, sought out in African American history class. And that was my first black teacher. Yeah. And I just want to I know one of the things that I was thinking about a lot during the Equity Challenge, because I was in the process of buying my first home. Mm-hmm. So thinking about, I guess before this Equity Challenge, I hadn't necessarily thought about white flight as something that happens here in our town. I thought that was a big city problem. But hearing about people talking about, especially talking about school districts, you know, when folks have kids and then they move out to the suburbs. Mm-hmm. So it really put some weight to where I was buying my home, and made me really think a lot harder about that. And I'm really proud to say that I bought a home within District 186.
Nice.
Not that any of our other districts.
Audience, you should be clapping right now. If you're in this space, let's clap. Yeah, definitely.
No, but
okay, but because we're talking about housing, I think the other big aha, and you know this because I was like, Mitch. So we always hear about Springfield, and when you were talking and introducing your thoughts and your background, Dominic, and about kind of really how there is this division, right? And sometimes I think depending on who you are, it's felt and it's intentional, and I think there's other things that are unintentional about it. But when we pull maps on education rates, there's a dividing line.
Absolutely.
And then when we pull, you know, different other economic, income things, when we look at data for the community in our work, there's clear dividing lines. And I'm like, what? And so then it was week 9, housing inequity in your backyard.
Yes.
And they started talking about the Home Loan Corporation maps and how, redlining, right? So I've heard redlining growing up. It's something you get taught, but I don't think we really truly get into it like it got into in the 21-week equity challenge, because at least for me it felt new. And so I looked up, I sought out, do you remember this? I searched the historic HOLC map for Springfield, and I overlaid the education and income data on top of that, and it was the red line sections of that historic map. So decisions made in what, the 40s and 50s.
Absolutely.
And now it's 2020, and we're still trying to figure out how to even grapple with the damage that has been done. And it just is insane. It's just, for me, it was like, what?
And then you layer that with other injustices or inequities that exist, right? And now you see why, you know, sometimes it's hard to overcome your emotions when you're talking about EDI from someone who's experienced them, right? As a black male, right? If I wasn't raised the way I was, right, then I would have been way behind, right, in terms of trying to catch up emotionally and mentally, right?
Well, wasn't it week 1 where they talked about racial identity and how for the person of color, your identity is almost outwardly driven unless you have that internal guide, basically.
Exactly.
And it was like the spectrum that they introduced, and that was sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And oftentimes, if you aren't seeing positive representations of yourself externally, then you're going to think you're less than, right? Or if you're constantly being told you're less than, you're going to start to believe it, right? I was always told and it was always instilled in me from a parental standpoint and from just I always had a close circle of individuals, and I was always built up, right? And my mom always poured into me, right? She always placed me around individuals who poured into me. A lot of my friends look like me, who are still some of my friends to this very day. We've expanded our friendship circle, but we all are similar, right? Where we all had individuals who poured in us, right? And we all are doing great work within our respective industries and arenas because we were poured into, right? So if I was never poured into, then my outcome may be different, or I may be, doing this work at 47 instead of 37.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. And so thinking about all these aha moments that we have and sort of these realizations that we have, so knowledge is awesome, but that knowledge needs to sort of transition into some action. I'm curious, Dominic, sort of putting on the Black Chamber of Commerce hat.
Absolutely.
What movement are you seeing in workplaces now, and especially in the last year, around racial equity?
Yeah, so I think that there's a clear understanding of the need to be intentional now, right? So individuals and those in leadership are starting to understand the need to embrace a better culture. I think if the last year has taught us, and the last year and a half really has taught us anything, is we can't sustain ourselves with just embracing a small portion of the workforce. So how do you expand the workforce? How do you expand that pool of individuals? And the easiest way to do that is to embrace culture, right? A culture and a sense of belonging, right? So no longer can you lead from a standpoint of, well, we're a great organization and people should want to work here.
Yeah.
Right? It's not doing anything, right? So you mean to tell me you can't even answer what makes you a great organization outside of what? Maybe your revenue, right? Yeah.
Efficiency, data.
Yeah, exactly. But who ensures that those things get done, right? It's not the CEO or the president at the top or the chairman, right? It's the boots on the ground, the workers, the workforce, right? So you have to cultivate and embrace workforce, right? And you broaden that by ensuring that you're bringing more people to the table. You're more forward thinking with embracing policies that are inclusive. And so I think finally, people are starting to take notice. And it's not, well, I would like to think that it should be because people just have a new sense of embracing and championing diversity and inclusion. But I think it more so is driven by the lack of workforce right now and trying to expand upon the pool of employees who are eligible to work at an organization.
Yeah.
And sustaining those individuals.
Not that this is about it, but you also sit on the Building Board Diversity Initiative, which is a collaborative initiative between many local organizations, including the Black Chamber. It was really a twofold strategy that we had to focus on creating boards in nonprofits that are open and welcome and know how to facilitate diversity and not just tick boxes. And then on the flip side, it's okay, but then when we look at who typically serves on boards, it's C-suite execs, it's higher leadership, but there might lack diversity in C-suite. So if we're only recruiting from certain levels of organizations, we're going to miss out on this richness that is our community. And so what are companies doing to really value up and down the chain people's voices and their leadership abilities? So you might be in management or something, but can I, as an employer, offer you time because you're a person of color, because you are looking for additional leadership opportunities? I don't have any currently in my organization to offer you, but you could get this valuable experience on a nonprofit board. Right. And I think that that's something, so you just talked about the culture and the productivity, but the purpose, and for me that ties so well in together, and it really just and no, it gives you a sense of belonging, right? So if a company is invested in a mission that resonates with you, you're going to be more prone to staying with that institution. And oftentimes, some businesses don't have money, but they have professional development opportunities, right? Or a network of professional development resources at their disposal. So what are they doing to ensure that their employees are better individuals when they walk out those doors, right? And maybe not walking out those doors permanently, but walking out those doors day to day, right? Yeah. What are you cultivating?
The challenge for all you CEOs, presidents, board chairmen, give your employees a sense of belonging, embrace culture, embrace identity, ensuring that, it's not just about your bottom line, but about embracing the community's needs and ensuring that your workforce looks like your community, right? I mean, that's low-hanging fruit, right? That's low-hanging fruit. And then all the other things that you want will again happen naturally, right? Because you'll have the right people at the table who are working for you.
Oh, now that we've figured out what we want everyone else to do, Dominic, what do we need to be doing as both a United Way and the nonprofit community?
Yeah, so continue to build the momentum that you're currently on, right? I think that no other statewide group, statewide organization that has the scope that you guys have is doing this work from a collaborative effort, right? Because I believe in collaborative activism, right? So as an activist in my own right, you guys are activists in your own right? So how can we come together to do great work, right? Through a collaborative effort. So collaborative activism, right, should be at the forefront of everyone's mission right now.
Yes, because one of the things that I also loved about this challenge in particular, and then offering the community conversations, we didn't say attend these community conversations, share your voice, even though that might not be your mode of operation or where you're most comfortable, especially with content that might feel new and ugly and yucky when you first read it.
Exactly.
There are tons of people who, it was over 13,000 people across the state. We had over 2,000, I believe, here locally in Sangamon and Menard counties. There was a large constituency out of Memorial Hospital that we know took it. But not all of them came to the community conversations. It was the people who really needed that outlet to be able to share how they were, because that's the way they take in information and create resolve, to keep wanting to move forward. And so I just hope that, not that this was a question, it was directed to Dominic, but I think, and one of the things that we talked about is how can we do this work again? How can we recreate this 21-week equity challenge again, and also continue these community conversations, which are so powerful?
Absolutely.
That might have been something you wanted to share.
No, and to take it a step further, that's the true essence of the work, right? Is embracing each other's experiences and then coming together and trying to figure out how we can better our community.
Well, and it was because Lisa always talked about that. So, it might not be that they connect to right? Not that it's convincing, right? But Lisa, and I think this is the bridge strategy or whatever, but it's okay, so, but maybe you relate to low income, or maybe you relate to having a child with different abilities.
Exactly.
That is then how you can connect to disparity or struggle and so then just assume that is then your everyday.
Exactly.
And that, I think, is super powerful because everyone, I would reckon to believe, everyone in this universe has probably felt a hardship.
Right.
And in that moment when you feel weak or judged poorly or whatever, that emotion is then so much more your everyday, you know what I mean,
exactly.
as an African American man, and yeah, so it's just, and I think about that too then, because the last week of the challenge really took, so now that we've done this work, 21-week equity challenge, you now have somewhat of a basis to understand how you can move forward as an ally. These are truly lived experiences of my neighbors.
Right.
I was like, I need to continue my understanding. I need to continue my education, because so much of my education, it's written by the victor, which is a whole nother, that's crossroads training, take it through SCOTR. If you haven't done that, we have so many resources to bear in this community, and we just need people to take advantage of it.
Right, exactly.
And I think before we end this, I just want to check in. Is there anything else that you would want to say directly to our podcast audience? Any plugs you want to give, or any message that you want to send out to the world?
Yeah, the one plug I want to give is United Way of Central Illinois is doing amazing work. And if you haven't become a supporter of what we're doing locally, and I say we because, you know,
You're
I'm loosely,
part of it.
I'm part
Of course
it.
you are,
Yeah.
Dominic.
United.
Yeah, you know, absolutely. So get involved. You know, check out your website. And if you're not getting involved with the United Way of Central Illinois, try to find another organization to get involved and support. You know, there's a lot of great work being done within the space in the community. So again, be intentional. Seek it out. Be intentional about ensuring that you're exposing yourself to other audiences. You know, just embrace change. Just because, again, something is comfortable for you right now doesn't mean that you can't stretch yourself and become comfortable with something else tomorrow. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the work that you did in this equity challenge. It really does make a difference.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you again for joining us for this episode of Living United in Central Illinois. As always, please be sure to subscribe to our audio podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, or check out and subscribe to the United Way of Central Illinois YouTube channel for videocasts of our Living United episodes. Lastly, you could visit our website at www.springfieldunitedway.org to get involved. So once again, I'm Mitch Baker, the Community Impact Manager at United Way, and on behalf of our entire staff, have a great week, and remember that great things happen when we live united. And thanks again to Shields for sponsoring our show. Did you know the Springfield Shields location just celebrated their 10th anniversary? And in true Shields fashion, they celebrated 10 years by supporting 10 local organizations that are doing good in our community. Shop and learn more at shields.com.